somewhere between the 1860s and 2021, I think the Statue of Liberty, its original intent has definitely gotten lost, and it's become this malleable symbol for political, use, and to, kind of divide people, right? It becomes this amorphous symbol that is pliable to whoever is wielding it. So it turned from being a statue that was supposed to be celebrating the end of slavery in the United States to a statue that then was framed as being a gift for the first centennial of the United States. So there was a kind of push and pull between the meaning of what it was from its very inception. Actually, the chains that the Statue of Liberty has underneath her foot, she was originally holding in her hand instead of that book that says, July 4th, 1776 or whatever it is. She's also modeled on a Roman goddess named Libertas. She emancipated people, and so that is where the model came from. It was a statue in its inception, and its full meaning was about the end of slavery. In 1626, 11 Angolans were brought here. They're the first black people to be here in New York City, which was then New Amsterdam. And I think the city had only been founded for maybe about 3 years before their arrival. They were able to petition the Dutch government, or the West Dutch India Company. I always want to switch those two words around. Yes, for their freedom, which was granted to them, I think, maybe about 18 years after being here. It wasn't a full kind of freedom, and they ended up being farmers in areas that are now like where NYU is in the West Village, which were lands that were considered to be frontier lands between the European settlers and the Native Americans. So not only were they growing the food for the colony, because most of the people who were here were not interested in growing food at all, so they were feeding everybody and keeping everyone alive, but then they were also the physical barrier to the, potentially hostile conflicts with Native Americans. And so that was also a part of my thinking with this, was to honor them, right? Like the first black people who were here, who set up communities, who fed the colonialists here, and who had their lands taken away from them within a generation or two after the British took over New York City. It became illegal for black people to own land or to be property owners. And so then that's where the more kind of rigid apartheid slave situation started happening here, which is embedded in the bedrock of New York City, and I think those some of those iniquities are still with us today. The key reasons for me wanting to make this sculpture was to be able to respond to the moment and honor the Black Lives Matter movement, which has been ongoing since 2013. And thinking about that as a 21st century update to the continual liberation struggles that have been, going on here for 400 years. Even I think in all of the conversations that have been going around in terms of the historical reckoning and dealing with public monuments and public space, and all the Confederate statues that were removed this summer, and in a way for me to think of a temporary monument as a public sculpture for the Black Lives Matter movement. And so then I think that also perfectly ties in with the original intentions of Bartoli in having it as a sculpture that could address or celebrate the abolition of slavery here in the United States.